So let's just start first and foremost. How did you become interested in using psychedelics in therapeutic settings?
Well, I did a lot of hypnotherapy work for about 5 or 6 years, and I made a lot of progress, kind of finding triggers and processing patterns, and kind of making myself a lot less reactive, and working with clients and doing the same. And I think I actually stumbled upon it. I don't know if it was a friend that told me, but I found Anderson Cooper's 60 Minutes episode. It was like just a 20-minute segment on the Johns Hopkins
Mm.
research where they were working with stage 4 cancer patients. And I saw that, and it just completely blew my mind. It just felt like a whole order of magnitude greater healing than anything that I had experienced up to that point. And so that's what really kind of got me excited about it in the first place.
Yeah, that research is super interesting. It appears, at least to my eyes, that the psilocybin in mushrooms is one of the best forms of medication on the market. It's not on the market, but
Yeah.
it's been shown to be highly effective in treating some of these disorders.
Yeah, I mean, it's been unbelievable in practice and in the underground, where people are actually doing the kind of following the same protocol that Johns Hopkins used, where you're putting a mask on and laying down and really listening to music and going
Mhm.
internal. I think that's really kind of the defining difference, where some people take mushrooms or do stuff for fun with it, and it's fun, but the ego is still very much active. There's a whole depth of healing that isn't really available until you really dive into that, into your heart, really, or into your deepest parts.
Mm. Yeah, I've told this story on one of the last interviews I did, but my very first experience with psilocybin, I didn't know any of the research at the time, but just, I guess intuitively, that's exactly what I did. Nighttime, laying on my couch, eyes closed, listening to music, and
Yep.
just got super immersed in these very beautiful, dancing, swirling, closed eye visuals that were interacting with each other. And it looked like they were dancing back and forth. I was just crying because it was so beautiful. It was like a piece of art. And that just sent me on this path. I'm curious, do you have any personal or professional experiences that you could share that set you on this path?
Absolutely. I think I've got a bunch of them. Over the last, I guess it's been 4 years now. I've been doing personally a lot of journeys, meaning like probably on average one a month, and it's been kind of spaced out at different times depending on what my wife and I both needed to process and heal through. And um, it feels to me like, the first time I tried ayahuasca tea, that was probably um, the biggest impact anything's ever had on me in well, ever. I was gonna say in one evening, but really ever. I mean, I had set an intention that I thought was fairly innocuous. Like, I was worried, I was really focused on my body and healing, and working on overeating at the time. That was kind of my main focus at that point. And instead of like having a journey that's somehow about eating, it had literally nothing to do with that, but it had a giant impact on both my overeating as well as just my base level of anxiety. And when I when I went into it, I took about 2 ounces of tea, a little over 2 ounces of tea, which is a really a healthy amount. And the first maybe hour and a half, I was so scared. Like, the fear that came up was 1,000% of anything I'd ever felt in this lifetime and this body. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And kind of like what you were saying with yours, I was seeing stuff that didn't really make sense. It, it with yours, it was visuals and dancing, and it brought up tears. With mine, it was like a dashboard of, I guess, either what looked like alien technology, maybe something really Asian looking as far as all the dials, and I couldn't make out any of it. I didn't understand what I was looking at, but for some reason it just freaked me out. Like I the facilitator Pablo came over and had to do some grounding work on me to help me kind of settle, but also stay in. I barely remember that, but the fear was just unbelievably overwhelming. But the impact, like the very next week after I kind of digested all of it, which was a lot, but I could tell my base level anxiety went down by about 80%, and it never came back. I mean, I didn't even know I was that anxious, honestly. I had a Reiki master that met with me once and did a little work, and she told me, there's so much anxiety in there. There's a real pissed off little boy in there. And I was like, okay, yeah, I could see that. That makes sense from my childhood and stuff. But I had no idea how much anxiety I was carrying around, that it had such a profound impact on just being with patients, being with clients as a therapist, just being at home with my family. It just shocks me how much one night, when you can surrender like that, can just change your whole life.
Definitely. I like that you use the term alien, because that's exactly how it felt in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about sharing our experiences with ayahuasca, and my base level of reality shifted for quite some time after that, because I felt like my understanding of what this reality actually is had kind of shifted pillars a little bit.
Wow.
Because I was thinking, how is it possible that my mind is in this place over here, but then once I come back down from this experience, I'm just in baseline kind of normal reality again? What even is reality? It's because it seems like two opposite ends of a spectrum there. And it was just a very strange thing to integrate back from, I thought. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I've seen that many times now with with friends and family and clients that have these experiences. I help them integrate a lot afterwards. The month after is like really key, where you are talking about like what you experienced and how much it shifts things. Like I've had probably 3 different clients say, this changes everything. Like they just can't even, especially that first night or two where you're just still kind of half in and half out, and have so much memory from it that you can just sit there and kind of ponder, what was that exactly like, and why did it feel like home? Most people will say, wow, it felt like home. I finally felt like me, or like I was able to connect with myself at a level that I never have. We do quite a bit with groups, and that's a whole nother experience where it kind of, I feel like both the ayahuasca and the psilocybin pull back the veil of thinking you're alone, thinking you're an individual and an island in this world, and no one gets you. Like all of those things that most of us have had, some experience of, just goes away, because you can feel like the essence of the person across from you without ever taking your mask off. Like the next morning after a big journey, you feel like some of these people are best friends that you've known your whole life, and you really didn't know them at all, 12 hours ago.
Okay, I like what you said there. Let's break that down a little bit further, because at least my understanding of the scientific literature is the default mode network, when the brain is under the influence of these things, it's getting shut down or weakened, and other connections in the brain are being formed and interacting with each other in ways that they don't normally do. And it's, at least in my experience, very similar to what you said, led to a feeling of, I'm one with everything. I'm not just me. Even like these trees and plants outside, they're breathing, and we're all a part of this one thing.
Yep.
So do you have any further understanding of that or something that you could add?
Yeah, I think, yeah, for sure. So, in one of the, well, actually in two journeys that I was participating in, I wasn't facilitating, I was just in a group. And it was a really profound moment where it was probably 30 of us, 20 to 30 of us in this one big space. And I had this experience of realizing that no one ever acknowledges, because a big part of my work is helping people heal from sexual assault, a lot of rapes and physical abuse, all sorts of trauma, and that's kind of my go-to in what I do. And so it dawned on me, deep in one of those states, and this was a ayahuasca and mushrooms together, uh, in almost 50-50. And I realized that no one ever acknowledges, like, okay, I hurt you, or I am the rapist, or I am the one who will take responsibility for that, so that others that have been assaulted can heal. And so in that space, that's what I did. I felt like this really strong urge to acknowledge, like, you know, I've gone too far. I've passed a point where, a girl wanted to stop, and I, went one too many times or something like that. So I own that in that space, and I felt myself own it for all men, or um, all people that have been in that position. And it felt like really powerful. It felt really like freeing. And then all around the room.
Interesting what you said, like the having similar experiences between people who are in a setting. What do you think that is? Because there's a lot of reports out there with similar things being said.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I had one other where I was facilitating just one-on-one with a guy. And afterwards, he came out and looked at me and said, "Wow, I can't believe your dad showed up." And I was like, "Wow, I can't believe you know that." Because I was just stunned at the moment. Both my dad and I was having because I take a little bit of medicine when I'm facilitating, and so I had an experience around that, with both my dad and my wife's. My wife was having some role in it as well, and he brought up both of those right afterwards. And I think it just goes back to the fact that we really are truly all connected, and connected to everything. And I don't know that I have a formula for how that works or anything, but I do feel like, from doing so many journeys and studying past life regression and studying near-death experiences, they all seem to have the same story. And meaning, as we die, we go through some process of crossing over and having a life review, and then there's some point in no return where you either cross over into this other place or not. And so I do feel like that reality of there being a home where our energy or our essence comes from, is all coming from the same place, essentially. And so there is like this interconnectedness there, where, from my understanding, from all the stuff I've read and watched, there's telepathic communication. It's super easy to have a conversation. There's 360-degree kind of viewing, like where you can see all around you. It's not just eyes that can only look, at 180. And so I think wherever we come from, in that way, is still here now. It's just that we're blind to it based on the things we decided to have in these bodies.
Yeah. And the way that this stuff works is super fascinating. Like, just maybe for any listener out there who doesn't know what we're talking about when we're talking about ayahuasca, it's these two plants that are found in the Amazon rainforest, and somehow the tribal people of that culture figured out that like the complex chemistry involved in just mixing two bits of plant material, and it creates this totally alien experience. Like the odds of that have to be 1 in a million, of trying these two plants together, mixing them in this certain way. Do you have any thought on that, or have you pondered it?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. It's kind of like when you hear stories of um, a tidal wave or tsunami, coming ashore, and all the animals are already at the top of, the highest point, as far as like they didn't get caught by surprise. So there's some inherent knowledge or communication, network between plants and animals and the earth and weather. It's so far out of our awareness. I think that the plant medicines that have been used in indigenous cultures for thousands of years, um, I think very likely came from some sort of knowledge. Like someone got taught at some point how some of these things work together. And then over time, just like we have in society, they keep tweaking it and figuring out, oh, if you put this on a wound, it'll heal. I just saw a video. Man, I wish I remember the details on it, but it was, I believe it was an orangutan where they had a camera in a forest and they were watching it, and it had gotten a big gash under its eye. And this was like one of the first times that researchers were actually able to see it go and find a plant and grind it up and chew it and get a bunch of saliva on it and then wipe it. And they said, this is the exact right plant. Like there was nothing else around that would have actually healed it. And it totally healed this giant gash in a matter of like a few days. And so I think there's some intuitive wisdom that the animals at least are able to tap into. And I think maybe the tribal people that came before us had that ability too.
This is trailing back a little bit in our conversation when you mentioned near-death experiences, things of that nature.
Yeah.
My first time being under the influence of ayahuasca, I was certain that I was going to die. Like I had opened some portal and I was going through it.
Yeah.
Do you think that is perhaps similar to what happens when we die? I know there's speculation out there that DMT is released in the brain, and that's maybe the life in review that happens, or something similar to like a dream state. I don't know if it's been proven or not, but I've heard that theory. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like it's probably something really similar. I've watched a lot of documentaries and read different accounts of near-death experiences, and there are researchers that have verified a bunch of these where basically the general experience, like one example is dying during surgery and having basically the essence or the soul pop out of the body, and it's looking down and at first kind of confused, like, oh, who is that? They don't look well. And then there's a friendly person that joins them, or energy that joins them and helps kind of calm them down as to what's going on. And in those accounts, like they're watching things happen in surgery, things like, anesthesiologist who says, oh shit, I turned the wrong knob, or I did something wrong here, and that's what killed the person, or made them flatline. And they've been able to verify that these accounts are true, because then that's for that essence is going around the hospital, able to go anywhere in the world just by thinking about where they want to go. And they will go and see their friends being scared, or their family mourning their situation, or getting the news, and be able to recount after they come back into their body, having a memory of that and being able to tell them, no, I heard you say in the hallway this, or I heard the doctor say that. And sure enough, those were true facts. So I think all of it is a dream state, right? You're in some sort of state that isn't just conscious, open eyes experiencing the world. So your ayahuasca experience is very similar to that, in that, in the ayahuasca experience, it's a little bit out of your control what happens in the dream, but but you're still having a full on experience with your eyes closed and, kind of going internal. So I think it feels a lot like that. And I think some people have full ego death experiences, especially with ayahuasca and psilocybin, where you probably do feel like you're dying at some level. And it turns out it was really just the part of you that needed to break off or heal, and let go of.
So now that we've kind of baselined what we're talking about here, how does this tie in with the other modalities of therapy that you use, like hypnotherapy?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing because, some people can't take some of these medicines, some of these plant medicines, for various reasons. They're on, SSRIs or an MAO inhibitor, or they have a history of schizophrenia or something like that, or bipolar disorder that they don't want to trigger and, make worse. So the hypnotherapy is something that I've been able to really use a lot, that I've learned with ayahuasca and with psilocybin and MDMA and using all these different plant medicines. You learn a lot about how we heal, because you go through a healing process, or someone, a friend goes through a healing process, and we integrate it all the time. So I'm constantly getting insights as to, like, how to help someone heal faster. So in one example that I just used yesterday is realizing that in a hypnotic state, just like with plant medicine, I can bring someone to a place where there's very little mind, there's very little chatter. They're in a peaceful state, and then we can bring up something that normally would really stress them out or cause them a lot of pain. And so, like, with some people will say with body dysmorphia, or they're really struggling with how they look in the mirror, or with aging, I can do mirror work in hypnotherapy that's very similar to if you were on a plant medicine and actually looking in a mirror, or the medicine's taking you to that place of seeing yourself much more clearly. And in those cases, if the person is really able to go deep into that state, they can have a huge transformation, similar to plant medicine, where you do start to realize your value really doesn't have anything to do with your looks or your money or your accomplishments. That it really is totally intrinsic. And obviously anyone making that shift is just going to be a lot happier and more at peace.
You said not everybody is ready to have some of these experiences. I'm curious, how do you know when someone is ready, and what is kind of the integration process look like for that?
Sure. Man, to me, it feels really intuitive as far as where they're at and if they're ready. But I guess mostly it's if they're really have a lot of conviction that this is something that's calling to them. I think, like I was mentioning, my mentor Pablo said, like, the medicine will find you, when it's your time. And that's exactly how it felt to me. I felt like I really wanted to have an experience like this, and I just mentioned it to 2 or 3 people, and within a month, Pablo showed up in my world, and I was able to have the experience. And I think what I've found, as far as like it working or not working with extreme cases where people think they're ready, but they're really not. In those cases, the ones that don't work are usually someone that's suffering from narcissistic personality disorder or something like that. And they want it for the wrong reasons. They're trying to have an experience where they gain power or more control, or, somehow grow in that way. And they really don't ever surrender to the medicine, because that's that's really the key. If you can't let go and surrender, then you're really just going to fight it the whole time. And it's kind of just this big ego battle against the medicine. And it still has helpful benefits, but it's nothing like if they were able to surrender and let go. I've seen two different clients truly release all narcissism, and one that was a legitimate sociopath who was able to fully surrender, because he got to a point where he decided the way he had been doing life up until this point just was not working for him. He wasn't getting what he really wanted ultimately. And as I just coached him into like, hey, when you get there, just whatever happens, allow it. If you can accept it, that's even better. But if just allowing it alone can make such a tremendous shift inside. And then as he came out, I think it took a week or so before he really found a new baseline, because it was such a dramatic shift. And he went from being like a corporate exec who was manipulative and nasty and, very punishing, to anyone that ever crossed him, to someone that is now like almost solely focused on just being a great dad and a good husband and supporting his family, and shifted out of that high status, VP role into a tech role where he could actually just be home a lot more and have a lot less stress. I mean, it's just dramatic change.
That's awesome. What are the specific conditions or psychological issues that you have seen that can be effectively treated with psychedelics? And what does a typical session look like?
Yeah. I've seen major depression in my wife in particular. Her whole family has a history of major depression on her dad's side. They descend from Native Americans that were forced into the Trail of Tears, and had just massive abuse, and so she has this very heavy energy that she could just slip into these really dark places for extended periods of time. And now, after about 3 years of that work, she's probably been doing sessions every 2 months or so, a lot with psilocybin. Psilocybin seems to be just an amazing antidote to treatment-resistant depression. People that have tried ketamine, have tried all sorts of other things, and not gotten the results they're looking for. And for her, it's been the biggest game changer. And as far as what a session looks like, it really depends. When I'm working one-on-one with someone, we really just start off by spending a lot of time, maybe an hour, really dialing in an intention for the journey, what they really want to get out of it, and maybe even 2 or 3 intentions. Sometimes we'll do something really deep, like healing the underlying cause of my anxiety, for instance. These are people that are like chronically anxious and just, I'm sure everyone has an aunt or somebody like that that's just, always in that fearful state. And so that's what I'm talking about in these situations. That would be like a really core intention. But then we'll also set kind of more, you'd think, superficial or tactical intentions, like, becoming a morning person, where you have a lot of, maybe you have, in my case, I had a lot of conditioning around mornings being bad, just based on growing up and having parents screaming at you to get up and get going, and like just that basic level of conditioning, and having to go to school when you didn't want to, and things like that. So that's kind of the beginning, is like setting those intentions. And then I also like to set an intention a lot of times, a relationship intention. So, if they're in a significant relationship, we might set an intention to heal or remove anything between us. So kind of going back to our conversation earlier, where where we're talking about everything being connected. I kind of look at it like that like there's these two people that are really super connected because they're in this, romantic relationship, but often there's stuff between us. There's things we're like not able to say. We have fear around it, or things we've done we have guilt around that we haven't really shared yet, or are judging ourselves for, things like that. Or even fights and arguments and stuff that hurt, that left a mark. And so those are kind of the three types of intentions that we'll play with a lot. And then I generally will take whatever medicine. Pablo's protocol is really amazing for veterans. Does a ton of veteran work with combat veterans in particular that are out of the military. We won't work with them when they're in, because you pretty much still need all that armor to get through whatever it is you need to do. But once you're out, it can be really debilitating. And so with veterans, he has a veteran protocol where you'll start with MDMA for about 2 or 3 hours, take the medicine, lay down, put a mask on, really be separate from other people. Even if it's a group that everyone's separated, you're not able to touch or interact or anything. It's all meant to be an internal job. And so you'll sit with the heart medicine for a while. And that's kind of it really opens up the heart. It allows for a lot of emotion to move, similar to what you were talking about with one of your journeys. And just like, I felt like my eyes were just leaking at different times. Like, I wasn't even necessarily having a huge emotional experience. It was just purging out this sadness, or things like that will come out on heart medicine. And then a couple hours in, if they're going for a longer journey, then we'll add some of the spirit medicine. So that's more of the psilocybin, ayahuasca, things like that will really open things up wide. And I think it's a pretty special combination, because you have kind of a soft start compared to, say, drinking ayahuasca tea, feeling the fear. Then the spirit medicine kicks in, and people then will have extreme experiences, past lives. I've had some where I've had a lot of Native American lifetimes, and one was one of the most heartbreaking, where our tribe basically got annihilated, and then it faded to black. Like, our entire culture was lost. And the amount of grief that I experienced from that and was able to release from that was just unbelievable. And so people have experiences like that, or they might go back to childhood and process something with their mom or dad, or a coach or a priest, or something that was really traumatic. Loss of someone that they couldn't process at all when they were younger. And then as they come out of it, I really don't spend a whole lot of time talking or anything like that. I kind of want to let them be with their experience, but clients will sometimes want to share 3 or 4 things, and I just kind of take notes on that. And then really that's kind of a wrap on that session until we integrate. And in the group work, we basically all spend the night, and in the morning have some breakfast together, and then have an integration circle where everyone's talking for a few minutes, 5 minutes or so, about whatever it is they want to share from the journey. Those, I think, are some of the most profound experiences, because when we come in and we meet all these strangers, and then you have this super mystical, insane experience, and feel really connected, it very quickly breaks all the stereotypes in your head of who everyone is that you judged on the way in, that we can't even help but judge, like, oh, he's clearly an executive with a lot of money based on that outfit, or whatever, right? Or or the opposite, or oh, this is a middle-aged teacher, or kind of those generic assessments we make all the time just get ripped to pieces in these integration circles, as you really feel the truth of how similar our experiences really are internally, when you actually take away kind of all the pretense and pretending, kind of like compared to, say, a Facebook post, it's like the exact opposite. People are really sharing their deepest truths with each other and some of their biggest pain or struggles, and really quickly find out how much we really have in common.
I have a question about the regulatory and legal side of things. You can
Yeah.
feel free to answer or not answer,
Sure.
but can you talk about how the current state of psychedelic assisted therapy, the legal side of it, affects your practice, and if there are any changes that you would like to see made?
Yeah, for sure. I think right now, most of what we do, we're working with plant medicines that are legal, but probably legal because they're unknown. They're so rare. Some of these heart medicines and things. And then with the psilocybin, that's clearly not legal. Ayahuasca isn't legal in most of the U.S. So we have to go places where it's legal. So you have to go to Costa Rica or Colorado or Oregon in order to do these groups and have people feel comfortable. And otherwise, people are doing things underground where it's really unsafe. I've had clients that have done work here in Austin in underground communities and had traumatic experiences on medicine because there's people running it that are disordered themselves, and it's kind of like the Wild West right now. There's no real good regulation of any of it, so that's the part that I find that's really unsafe. So you really have to find someone that's done it, that really trusts the facilitator, that's going to hold space and protect everyone, from each other for that matter, or from, someone wanting to touch someone or heal someone, or, because you get all these ideas in your mind. And if you follow them all while on medicine, that's where it gets more dangerous, I think. But what's happening right now with the trials with psilocybin and MDMA, here in Austin, there's a couple of practices that are in clinical trials. And I really hope that in the next year to 2 years that MDMA becomes legalized. And I think that alone would have a tremendous impact on psychedelic assisted therapy, because it's something then that could be advertised and could be really scrutinized and managed in a way that what you're getting, that it's a safe environment. There's no chance of being hurt by it because of unscrupulous people involved. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it certainly does. I was curious to get your take on where you think this field of medicine's going 5-10 years from now, but it seems like the consensus between you and some other people that are in the space is that MDMA will be one of the first dominoes to fall, hopefully psilocybin in a few years after that.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, where we're at 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, I think it's going to be unreal, because the more research that's done, right now, most of the research that's out there is about what we've been talking about, kind of the psychology and the benefits of, say, releasing depression or anxiety, and kind of the common things that so many people struggle with. But we've been working a lot, my wife and I, because she has a rare disease, or I don't know exactly what you'd call it, but where she doesn't make something called IgG4, which is a part of the immune system that suppresses the immune system when it sees like, okay, everything's getting better, let's kind of ratchet everything back. And instead, she has like probably 6 different autoimmune disorders that flare up at different times because there's nothing tamping it down. But what we found is that for all those flare-ups, she has lots of different pain and, rashes and things that that people go through all the time, rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, and these physical manifestations of things that usually have something to do with early trauma. But the relief that she feels from these journeys is unbelievable, because not only is the psilocybin able to um, uh, purge out a lot of the inflammation, which is what's causing all the pain, but it's also an immunomodulator. So it's actually able to do the thing that this IgG4 isn't doing. I don't know if it's actually turning it on or not, but I think as we go through real research of some of the physical ailments that people are having and applying all of these medicines to it and seeing what it resolves, like I really think there's going to be, a handful of these medicines that are around the world that will really change people's lives and give them, like, not just a band-aid, but actually resolving the root cause of some of this stuff, so that they don't have lupus anymore, or they don't have, these flare-ups anymore.
Yeah. Have you received any skepticism or resistance from peers of yours in this space? And if so, how have you looked at that?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. I think I did get a lot of, I think, negative feedback or kind of criticism from a professor at one point that was teaching. I don't even remember what class, but some psychology class in the master's program, and I realized then that professor, she was a follower, like truly waited for all the research to be done on anything, and really didn't believe that you should in practice do anything that hadn't been researched and like proven out. And I remember, because we were talking about EMDR, which I don't know if you know much about that, but it's a modality where you use these little tappers. You hold them in your hand and they vibrate back and forth, and it's meant to process trauma and old wounds and things. And she told me, because I had used it in hypnotherapy with a client who had a high anxiety, and she's like, "Well, that's not allowed," And I go, "What do you mean it's not allowed?" And she's like, "Well, it's not researched for anxiety. It's for depression, or for PTSD." And I just kind of chuckled, and I kind of backed off, because it was her show. But I realized that there are therapists out there in particular that are wired that way. They just wait until something is fully proven out and kind of got a stamp of approval from somewhere. And I'm just not one of those. My sweet spot is being much more of a creator. So when I'm in a session with someone, I'm not really thinking about, I'm going to use this modality, or I'm going to make them do this thing that'll make their mind do this. I'm much more intuitively connected to them, especially after drinking so much ayahuasca. I feel really intuitively connected to them, and just kind of allowing for the path to show up as far as what's going to help them heal the quickest. And so I'll try things all the time, because these tappers are just things that vibrate in your hands. I'm not going to break your brain holding some things that vibrate in your hands. I'm not giving you, heavy drugs or psych meds or anything like that. So it's a great way to experiment with both hypnotherapy, and I've had some people use them on plant medicine just to experience what that's like. And we just, keep having great results. And to me, that's it. Like, there has to be some explorers like us that are willing to take some risks and really put helping someone heal above everything else.
Yeah, I think especially today, it's easier than ever to be critical of science and the research and some of the process for how some of these investigations are being done, and like the money that's involved in it, and why certain things are legal versus illegal. So I agree. I feel like we as Americans should be more intuitive, and listen to our bodies, listen to people's firsthand experiences, instead of just going with whatever 3-letter agency tells you is safe and not safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more that we listen to our intuition, I think Actually, that was one of the things I did in my probably mid-30s. Is I don't even remember why this happened, but it was kind of before I found plant medicine. I was just doing a lot of healing work, and one of the things that I sat with one day was, what do I really regret so far in life? Truly regret, like wish I could go back and undo. And every single one of them had one thing in common, and that was that I overrode my intuition.
Mm.
I knew I had a feeling like, oh, this doesn't feel right, I shouldn't do it. And I used my mind to rationalize, no, it's fine, just do it. You already made this plan or whatever it was. And every single thing had that in common. And so ever since then, I've really leaned into my intuition more and more, especially when it comes to helping people or making any real important decisions.
This is more of a personal question, but what's the most rewarding aspect of your field of work to you?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Great question. Um, I, I really love that when I can truly help someone have a major transformation. Like, I have one client, she told me at one point that she feels like her life started at 40, like after she started doing this deeper work. And we started with hypnotherapy for a while, and then eventually she did some plant medicine, and now she's off doing it all over. And that's great and really rewarding in its own right. But she has two little girls, and they now have a mom who is so fully expressed and open-hearted and able to reflect on how she's doing as a mom and as a wife, and all of it. It's realizing that those kids now have a completely different life than they would have had, because so much happens in those first 10 or 15, 20 years where you're just getting imprinted on by your parents, and how, dysregulated or not they are, and how they react to things, and how much anxiety is in the space, and how much they're overreacting, and, having big rage fits or whatever. And so as I am helping parents heal, that's definitely the most rewarding.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is the last question that I have written down for you. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has your perspective on mental health in general changed since you started practicing like you are now until now?
Wow. I think starting out, because I did my undergrad in psychology, so we did some, and that was like in my early, 20s, and we did some counseling, kind of mock counseling with other students in the class. And I remember I was in the Marine Corps at the time and going to school on Saturdays and at night, and I was working with this warrant officer who had a teenage daughter, and she was acting out. And I remember just thinking like, I I don't know what the fuck to do. Like I don't know how to help this guy. I'm only 22. She's only like 4 years younger than me or whatever. And I'm thinking he's really overreacting, and like, what am I gonna tell him? Like, stop being a jerk or what? Like I really didn't know how to handle it. And so I didn't go into a master's program for a long time because of that one experience of not really having the tools, and really not having any good tools. Like in therapy right now, we don't really have a solution for narcissism. That's why it's everywhere. We don't have a protocol that goes, okay, when you identify that they have narcissistic personality disorder, you do these 7 things and then they won't. Like, that doesn't exist, and it still doesn't exist outside of plant medicine. So it's in the field, there are so many things that we just have to accept as unfixable at the moment. And as soon as you add plant medicine to it, almost all of that goes away. It really comes down to whether or not the person wants to let go of that or not. You know, that surrender we were talking about earlier. So I feel like it's given me, you know, power to help people heal that is almost immeasurable. And I can't even really put it into words now for people that haven't experienced it. They just have to experience it to have their own revelations and their own breakthroughs in healing. And yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing is it just feels like we can finally really help people that really need it. And especially the more, if you think about people that have really suffered, like had traumatic, difficult childhoods, or assaults in college, or you know, getting beaten, things like that, that are really, really horrendous. These medicines can help them lift the pain from that, like permanently, where they just look at those old experiences like something they read in a book. Like it did happen, they know it, but they can talk about it, you know? So to me, that's the biggest difference. And it is like all that matters. That's why I'm on this, you know, talking with you right now, and being willing to risk myself, my, you know, being public about it all, and talking frankly about how it works, because the more people that can start to experience this, like, you can really heal the planet, you know. It's with the medicine that's built into the planet.
Yes. Provided by Mother Earth.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's amazing. And in our day and age of big pharma and pill pushing, I think this is a super important conversation. So thank you for being willing to have this discussion with me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Love to talk again sometime.